Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. My guest today is Eleni Mitas. Eleni is the author of Mindset Dominance and the upcoming book, The Ego Exposed. She is the podcast host of The Shame Game and Soul Sisters Get Real, and founder of HypnoFit, the world's only global hypnotherapy clinic with 21 clinics across the globe. Eleni had a spiritual awakening on her 53rd birthday where she awakened to the divine download that her identity and her achievements were firmly attached to an ego identity. This ego identity has shown as a programmed conditioned state that was not the highest expression of her soul. Eleni gave away her money, stopped most of her business activities, simplified her life, and has been shedding the many layers of programming ever since. She now lives by the ocean and is totally in love with her newly aligned magical life. Eleni's mission is to inspire you to open your heart and follow your soul's calling so that you too can fall madly in love with yourself and your life as well. Eleni, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation.
Me too. I appreciate that you also have an interest in talking about shame and helping to bring light to the idea of what shame is and how we really can do what we can, hopefully, to all move away from it and not hold on to it so tightly. I just, for a quick overview of the history, I started this podcast because I did want to explore shame, explore it in the most personal ways, and then think about with guests how that's also influencing us on larger scales, in our communities, in our workplaces, and just out in the world in general. And I wanted to talk through what shame is, how it affects all of us in some way, shape, or form, and just shed light and promote the idea, and promote the idea of getting away from shame, and just I want people to feel that they can take the journey of letting go. And then the other side of the coin is I want to promote the idea of shining without shame. And when I think of that, I think of what brings us to a place of not wanting to shine or wanting to cover other people's light is this idea of comparing and competition and scarcity, feeling that there isn't enough for everybody to succeed in life, to be happy, to have that joy. Those are the reasons why I started the podcast, and I just thought I would share them now. I share them from time to time, and that's where we find ourselves today. So I wanted to find out from you if you have a story or an experience that includes the experience of shame and how you have been moving past it, or how you were able to move past it and move past any beliefs that were outdated, maybe about how you were thinking of yourself, that you recognize that's not who I am. That's not what I want to believe anymore. Please feel free to share.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Shame is something that deeply impacts our sense of self, and it deeply impacted my experience. I had a lot of shame. So my background is that I come from a family that has values about unity and family and love. And I'm the youngest of 5. There was no divorce in my family. There was no separation in my family. Everybody was with their partner, their husband, their wife, their children. I come from a very big, loving family. And I was just following what, I thought my blueprint was, which was to do the same thing. And I did follow that blueprint for a while. I went to university. I met my husband, who was of the same ethnic background as me. He was born in Australia, but his parents were from Cyprus, which is where my parents were from. I figured that, why change things up? Let's just keep things simple. Let's just do what everybody else has done because it makes things simpler. Why not just fall in love with someone who has the same background as you? It makes everything so much easier. And then I had my son, and everything seemed to be so perfect and exactly how I wanted it to be until it came crashing down one day. And that was when I found myself falling in love with another man who was at my workplace. And it shocked me because I was not in an unhappy marriage. I believed that I was in a perfect marriage. And it really took me by surprise. Like, what the hell am I feeling? I came from a very traditional background. My husband was the first man I had ever been with. I'd ever slept with. I was just towing the line exactly like a good girl needs to. And then all of a sudden, I had these incredible, strong feelings for someone who was very, very different to me, who came from a different background, who had a different family value system, who was very, very different to me. And I just fell head over heels. And so then it was this deep shame about, like, what the hell am I doing? Why have I got these feelings? And I was fighting the feelings, and then I couldn't fight them anymore. And I ended up having an affair with this man. And I cannot express the shame that I felt during this time, because on the one hand, I was the good daughter-in-law and good wife and good sister and good daughter and doing all the right things, having family functions and parties at my house and cooking every night and going to work and raising my beautiful boy. And at the same time, I was having this affair with another man. It really was so misaligned with my values being honesty as being number one. That's what I was brought up to believe and to know was my truth. And so what actually happened, Tiffany, is that when you are so misaligned with your own values, you get physically unwell as well as emotionally unwell. So I got depression, chronic anxiety. I got irritable bowel syndrome. So my body was reacting in a way that showed me that this wasn't who I was. I was basically in two lives. And it was for a long period of time, a period of 4 years before I finally made the break from my first husband. But there was so much shame. Even after I made the break and even after I married the man that I fell in love with, and I was with that man for 22 years. We had a beautiful relationship. But even after that, there were so many instances and so many scenes that I was deeply ashamed about. Even a typical scene like a Christmas Day when my son had to be collected by his father to spend half of Christmas with him. And so he didn't get to stay the whole day and spend the day with his cousins. He was the only one out of, a big clan of 20 cousins that he was always the different one. Even at the school that he went to, I came from a neighborhood that there were no broken marriages. There was a high percentage of Asian population in the hardworking Asian people in the country that I was in, the area that I was in, and they were very traditional. There were no divorces. Peter was the only one at his school that came from a divorced family. And this brought me enormous shame when I saw that I had created this situation for my son. The only reason that he was different and that he had a different experience and that he had to share his week between my house and his father's house was because of my selfishness. And that's the way that I saw it.
Thank you. Thank you for being open and speaking about that experience, which I can imagine took you on a new journey, a new part of your journey. And I'm wondering if you are open to reflecting on this. I'm wondering if you have been able to hone in on what it is that brought you to a place where you made a choice to have an affair. I mean, it's because there's the shame that you felt, but then there's the truth of whatever your heart or whatever your spirit was looking for or trying to understand. And if you're open to it, I'm just
Of
curious
course.
what
Of course.
that revealed to you.
Yeah. And really, it only revealed to me looking back, because at the time it made no sense, because everything seemed perfect. As my mother said to me, your husband's not an alcoholic. He doesn't beat you up. Uh, he doesn't gamble. Like, what is your problem? And I did get along with him, and we were great friends, and we had a great relationship. I can't say that he was at fault in any way, because he wasn't. But when I reflect back, I feel that I was screaming for freedom. I came from a background that was very strict. I wasn't permitted to go out with my friends. I wasn't permitted to have any kind of freedom in my life. I had very strict, especially my mother. She was very strict, even as a young child. When friends would come knocking on my door to ask me to go across the road to play in the park, my mother would say no, she has to vacuum. Of course, she's not going to go outside and play. So this is the kind of family background, very, very loving, but very, very strict. And there was no time for things like, playing with friends, because friends, it's not what we did. What we did was we did all the right things in life. We followed the right path. And so I felt like, looking back, I just wanted my freedom. I just wanted to rebel. I just wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do. And I didn't know that that I wanted freedom. I didn't know that I wanted to experience something different. So I never had the opportunity of experiencing anything different. It sounds really archaic, but even my first husband was a blind date set up by a family friend. And it wasn't as if I had to marry him or anything like that. It wasn't like that. I chose to continue dating with him and to get engaged and so on. But it was still orchestrated for this to be the perfect daughter, to be the perfect sister, like when we had family functions, to be the one that cooked the most beautiful meals. It was just so held, so strict, so rigid in terms of what was the right thing to do and what was the wrong thing to do. The man that I fell in love with, he represented everything that was quite opposite to that. He came from a family that was divorced. His parents were divorced. He had, for a number of years, smoked dope. He didn't smoke dope at the time that I met him, but he was that kind of person. He chose not to go to university. He was very free-spirited. And that really attracted me, how free-spirited he was, how much he just went with the flow of life as opposed to the rigidness of life. And so when I look back, I feel like my soul just wanted to fly, wanted to be free. And my second partner, who was my second husband, just really allowed my soul to do that.
That's insightful, and that's so personal. Yes, thank you for being open. And it makes sense once you shared in the beginning about your family background and the values. That was what was going through my mind was, was there this, this desire, this yearning to walk your own path and be free and make your own choices. So I understand. I do. I'm curious, Eleni, as time went on, as you took this other path and continued on your life's journey, how were you processing your own life, your own choices, and was there a point where you came to recognize I need to work on loving myself? I need to work on my own self growth, self-awareness. I'm just curious, like, what were the things that as you continued on with your life, did you recognize were important to help you in your own evolution? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I it felt like to me that I needed to find the courage. That's what it felt like for me to follow my heart. So when I decided to leave my first husband, because even after he found out about the affair, he didn't want to lose me. So if I had chosen, I could easily have stayed there. He was literally begging me to stay. And it was a big decision because at that moment I knew that I was now going to be responsible for breaking up my son's world as he knew it. And so it was a very difficult decision to follow my heart and to go with the man that I had fallen in love with and to create a life with him. But that became like something that I followed, which was follow my heart, not my head, follow my heart. What's not the logical thing, but what my heart is yearning for. And that even translated in business as well later on. So I was in the corporate world for 22 years and climbing the corporate ladder and doing all the things that I thought I needed to do before I had this big yearning to let all that go and follow my heart and follow a completely different path. So it became like my mantra, which was, it's going to be difficult. It's hard to follow your heart when there are so many reasons, logical reasons to stick with, what your logical mind says. But that's where true joy lies. True joy lies in following your heart. And so that became like the pinnacle for me was I've just got to lead from the heart. I've got to follow the heart every time. I've got to be that courageous. That's the path. Even though it's not the path that most people go on, it's the path that I have to go on. And it was just this strong drive to do that. I'm not sure whether I've actually answered your original question.
Oh, let's see. Maybe in part you have. I'm thinking, well, where I was coming from when I asked the question is, okay, so you made this decision and it brought a lot of shame into your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But of course, you continued with your life. You continued living your life. You took a different exit off the freeway and your life's journey continued. And I was curious, how did you, I suppose that what I was curious about when I asked the question was knowing that you felt shame and after now hearing you say you were following your heart, how did you reconcile that? And I think also what other growth did you find on your journey that was important as you continued, as you made this big decision that changed your life so dramatically? Okay. What were the qualities? What was the work that you found was important, even though you were following your heart and you believed that, but shame was I imagine maybe was it deeply under the layers of life for you? And just curious, how did you continue that journey and continue growing, learning about yourself and evolving?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so during the time that I was having the affair and I was going through the turmoil, I saw, this was before Google existed because I'm 55 years old. And in the newspaper, I saw an ad and the ad said, "Are you feeling helpless, hopeless, as if everybody has control of your life except you?" And I thought, oh my God, somebody understands me, somebody knows me. And so I contacted this institution, and this was run by a clinical psychologist, and he would do group work every week in this hall. But he would give a lecture first, and then we would go into facilitated groups and we would share our story. And so this was what helped me actually leave my husband and start my new life. And the course was called Human Relations for Everyday Living. And I remember thinking at the time, this is what we need to teach our children. This is what they need to learn at school, not maths and, Shakespeare. We have to teach them the basics. Like, like not to see themselves as a victim, to see themselves as empowered. And this is what this course really did for me. It really showed me that it's okay. I remember the lecturer at the time said a statement that really made me understand myself so much more. He said that nobody can really stand at the moment that you're getting married. Nobody can honestly say, I will be with this person for the rest of my life. And I will love this person for the rest of my life, because you do not know. You can say, I intend, my intention as I stand here today is to love this man and to be with this man for the rest of my life. But you cannot possibly know that this is a fact. And just hearing this sentence was a game changer for me, because it was like, you know what? I'm not so bad. It's just like, yes, I didn't behave in my highest possible way. I wasn't respectful in the way that I handled the situation. I could have done better upon reflection. It wasn't okay to cheat and lie, but I was so fearful that I didn't know what else to do except to cheat and lie. I was so caught in fear. But now I knew, reflecting back, that my intention was to be with my husband for the rest of my life. My intention was not to have an affair. My intention was not to fall in love with another man. My intention was always that it was going to be a forever thing. And so my intention is different to what actually happens, because we can't control our feelings. We can't control our emotions. We can't control the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and we can't foresee them. And so that was a game changer. And so the lectures were around this concept of being a victim and being empowered. And so that, for me, I did this for 4.5 years. For 4.5 years, every Thursday night, I turned up at this particular meeting where he would give a lecture. And these concepts that he was talking about were absolutely like new for me. It was like a new perspective, a new lens of looking at the world, a completely liberated way of living. And it changed my whole perspective. And then after some time, working in the corporate world and so on, I, found hypnosis and did, during my training, when you do train to become a hypnotherapist, part of the training is that the hypnotherapy has to be done on you. And so I was able to release the depression, the anxiety, the shame that was still contained within my body, or so I thought, until a very recent event where, so I thought that I had. And so my life continued on along this path where I became a hypnotherapist and so on. And I'm thinking, Tiffany, like, I'm done. Like, I've done so much healing. Like I've done that human relations through everyday living. I've done so much hypnosis. I'm a therapist. I've seen thousands of people. Like, I'm good. And about 4 months ago, from today's date, about 4 months ago, what could be 5 months now, I can't recall, I decided that I wanted to learn how to meditate. And it's interesting coming from a hypnotherapist, but it is different. And I wanted to do it, through a course. So I did a meditation mastery course. And part of this meditation mastery course was that in one of the meditations, you had to remember a scene of shame. And before doing this meditation, I thought, like, this is going to be easy for me. Like, I got rid of everything from me. Like, I'm good, because we're talking now 30 years in the future. So I'm good. I'm done. But I'll do this meditation because I'm a good student. And I did the meditation, and instantly, the moment I was asked to bring up a scene that I felt shame for, I felt this absolute sickness in my body. I felt the contraction. I felt that it was still sitting there. It was like a huge lump of darkness that was so hard. And that scene was so shameful that I could not stop crying. And I allowed myself to cry. And when you said, how did you work through it? This is the final piece. The final piece was to let myself cry, to not distract myself, because by now I had learned new techniques in the awakening process, which is not to distract yourself, not to go and do something else, not to pretend that didn't happen, but to just really sit with it, really sit with the emotion. What's going on in my body? Let it flow. Feel the shame, feel it. Just allow yourself to feel it. Don't block it. Don't try and pretend it's not there. Don't try and change it and reframe it. Feel what you feel you did to your son. Feel it until it's all out of your system. And I literally cried for half a day. And then that's when I created my podcast, The Shame Game, after that, because I thought, if I'm holding on to this shame for a scene that occurred 27 years ago, then people are holding on to shame that they're not even aware of.
Yes, right. And again, thank you for being open. And I'm thinking as you're sharing about this more recent part of your journey, and I've talked about this on the podcast, this idea of not letting shame have this gripping effect on us, hold on to us forever, make us think that we're not enough. The idea I've talked about is, finding ways to ungrip or release shame from our lives and from our beliefs. At the same time, there's this idea of being accountable that I've talked about here with guests on many occasions. And I'm wondering, and maybe this is part of what you were just sharing, although you didn't use the word accountability, how has accountability been a part of your journey after this decision? Because I think accountability isn't, in my mind, making us, we're not sacrificing ourselves, right, on the altar of truth when we're accountable, but we're acknowledging our role, our decisions, and accepting them, but not hiding from them. And so I think when I heard you talk about this more recent meditation experience, I was like, oh yes, I want to ask her about accountability. How has that been a part of your journey? How has it appeared? How have you interacted with it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when after quite some time, many years had passed when I was in my second marriage, and I just had this burning need to apologize to my first husband. Like, not just an email, not a text, I wanted to go and cry and apologize, because I had never done that. And he had moved on. He had a new wife. He had 2 sons. But many years had passed, but I thought, I have to do this. And as I knew the universe would conspire to support me in this, because it was something that was so pure that I needed to do. So I didn't ring to see if he was going to be home. I drove to his house, which used to be our former house. Usually the garage door is closed, and it's a big wall and you can't see inside the house. The second I drove up, the garage door was open and he was tinkering around in the front garden next to his car. So I thought, the universe knew that this has to happen. This scene has to happen. And I cried. I said, sorry. I said, and this gets me quite emotional now. I said, you didn't deserve this. You didn't deserve to be treated like this. You're a good man. You're a fantastic father. You were a fantastic husband. You didn't deserve any of this. And I am so sorry for what I've done to you. I'm so sorry. And, in that moment, I know that it was more about me than him, because he had moved on. And he said to me, excuse me, I'll just blow my nose.
Please, yes.
He had said to me, so do you feel better now? So it was understood that this was not about him. This was about me. And I said, yeah, I do. And so I just needed to do that. I needed to really humble myself to to him and apologize for my actions. And I didn't know that I still had this kind of emotion going on for that scene, but it was a scene that had to happen. So that for me was accountability. And then more recently with the meditation, it's interesting you say accountability, because for me, that's what came up for me. It was like, well, it's not enough for me just to recognize this. I have to own this. I have to own this without being this. I have to own that I did this act that was very low vibrational, very selfish, not in the highest good of all. And I have to own that I did it, but without embodying that this is who I am. So, because it's not who I am. Our actions are not who we are. It's something that we did in our time that we did not master. It was a moment in time which we did not master. And so I then knew that I had, with this podcast that I created, The Shame Game, that I had to be the first episode. I had to do the first episode, no guess. I had to say what I did. I had to actually say to the world the very, very worst part of the affair that I had not told anybody else. And as I was leading up to doing it, Tiffany, there was a part of me that was saying, you don't have to. You can just still do the podcast and just interview other people. You don't actually have to do it yourself. And then there was this, no, you have to do it yourself. You cannot ask these personal questions to other people unless you do this yourself. You have to be accountable for what you have done. And I did. The very, very first episode, I talked for about 20 minutes on this scene that I felt deep, deep shame that I would say was probably my lowest, well, not probably, it was my lowest moment in terms of vibrationally where I was how I behaved as a human. And that's how I was accountable. And the accountability question, Tiffany, I think is ongoing. Like, it's not just, now that's it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there'll be any more affairs or anything like that. Definitely not. I know that I'm, way beyond any of that. But owning up to everything in terms of being so truthful about everything, because that is my number one value. So everything, like standing in your truth for everything, even if it's going to hurt the other person, even if you think it's a little thing and you don't need to. Like, that's my absolute mantra now, which is I will not say something so somebody else feels better, but it's not truthful for me. If I'm asked to speak my opinion, it has to be coming from a place of truth. The intention is always going to be for the highest good, but it has to be my truth. So always holding myself accountable to the ultimate truth always, and to make it a daily mantra, like, am I in my truth? Am I speaking in my truth? Like, even in this interview, I could have chosen not to go to the very deepest where I felt raw. I could have admitted that story, but no, that's what came up for me, and that's what needed to be shared. That was my deepest truth. So just to always be accountable in my truth,